burning in the frostbite night. They'll tax the wheat but silence the plains. Our freedom's a train they keep derailing with chains. Oh, Canada, split at the seams, a quilted provinces chasing their dreams. Do we stand as one, or break at the tide? The West holds its breath and the East holds its pride. Western separation or Canadian unity, we're torn like a maple leaf lost in the sea. But Elias Guy's voice cuts through the static. Stand strong, stand tall, this land's democratic. From the Rockies' rage to Parliament's walls, we'll fight for the freedom that answers our call. The podcaster's words spin like a rogue CBC, a rogue wave crashing on a woke TV. They'll paint us as rebels, but we're just the spark, light in the dark where the silence leaving marks. The government's hand weighs heavy like snow, but the West won't kneel where the storm they can't slow. Alias guys, truth burns a hole in their lies, a northern light screaming, a nation survives. So rally the trucks, let the coffee shops hum. The West beat it hard, won't stay deaf and dumb. Through protest and picks, over carve our own way. A Canada to fraction, we're fighting to stay.
Hello Canada, welcome back to another edition of the Canadian Citizen Journal. Just got some production tunes made from some amazing Canadian artists. These ones very local, based out of Saskatchewan. We've got a lot going on to talk about here today. It's Canada. You know, it never ends with all of the information that the government likes to hide. And of course, doing the typical, Rafe Wart, can you see it? Ready? Go get the ball. We're going to kind of break down some major stories that are going on here today. One of the big ones is that there was actually a report that was brought out. And it's by the Canadian Human Rights Commission. Canada, and this is of course perfect timing for these reports to be coming out, because as I've been kind of trying to explain the downfall of Canada, all of a sudden a lot of the resource sector fleeing the country, businesses running, bankruptcies, people walking away from their houses. I mean, I lived through all this in the 80s after the Turd Senior did his first big attempt to destroy our nation. But it's good to see that there are actual organizations out there that are starting to blow the horn on what's going on. Now, rather than just kind of break the document down, I want to kind of promote these guys. This is Now Media Group. These guys are fabulous. They were running a top-notch news agency local to, I believe it's Kelowna. And when the government pushed through all of this bought and paid propaganda media legislation, it crushed them. So they didn't give up. They fought, and they have been slowly building themselves a big platform. They're, what are they at here now? 41, just about 41,500 subscribers. I'm one of them. I'm proud to support them. They're really good. They say it as it is. They have great guests, and I love the way that they break things down, because they talk Canadian. And they really show, and they're like myself and other independents, just how biased and how far the media will go in order to twist the truth. So let's just dabble on their takedown of this bombshell report, just solidifying what I've been trying to get out to Canada.
The lead story today, economy is a human rights crisis, actually, and that's from the Canadian Human Rights Commission. I mean, you can't get much worse than that. Canada's economy is so poor, it represents a human rights crisis. And that goes against what Mark Carney said the other day and what Philippe Champagne says. We're going to be all right. The agency in the report said inflation, housing shortages, risk rising poverty rates, and the fundamental human right to adequate standard of living at risk. And this is in Canada. This is Canada. This is like shocking. This is absolutely shocking. And again, we talk about it on the show all the time. Energy is everything, and cheap, reliable energy is prosperity. And it's been squandered at the altar of climate change agenda from the Trudeau and Carney Liberals. Ian, any thoughts on that?
Well, we have to bear in mind who it is that said this. It's the Human Rights Commission. Human Rights Commission in a report. And a lot of this report is complaining about how there's no way to like take the government to court over a lack of wealth, basically. So it's a lot of like pie in the sky nonsense that you'd expect from the religious group known as the Human Rightists, who believe in the mystical powers of human rights. A lot of it is therefore ridiculous and bogus, but it is quite interesting to see that people from that sort of extreme progressive end, often like described as being on the far left, although I don't really know where they are, the progressives. But it's interesting that even they have noticed how bad the economy is. They've just translated it into their religious language to talk about human rights and things like that. Little do they realize, or maybe they do realize, but they're on the same page as people who are upset in Alberta, for example, and want Alberta to separate. Or, you know, even like the trucker convoy and people like that. They're on the same side as those Canadians who are also furious and despairing about the economy. But those Canadians obviously aren't co-religionists of these human rightoids. So they don't really speak the same language, but they're focused on the same problem. And I find that rather interesting. But I'd also say the progressive types, the lefty types, they don't often have much in the way of a plan to grow the economy, do they? They're much better at shrinking economies, in my experience, and regulating them, putting obstacles in the way. But they do like judicial warfare. So I think that's why they concentrate on the legal thing. They want the legal right to sue the government for poverty. So, I mean, I don't think that's going to create a rich society necessarily, but that seems to be what they're upset about.
Well, they have some ammunition, though. National poverty rates increased 4 years in a row, and that's according to Stats Canada. 4 million people now living in Canada, below the poverty line. Approximately 10 million people, or 25% of the population in provinces, lived in households that reported experiencing some form of food insecurity. And we've showed those stats before. Half of Canadians now $200 away from meeting their monthly obligations. These stats are all over the place. So, I mean, the stats are playing into their hand for sure. And the Human Rights Commission completed their February report in February, and that follows Privy Council polling on likelihood of recession in 2026, so meaning things are going to get worse. Even Tiff Macklin says if we don't get CUSMA, we could be entering a nightmare. And question on whether the government in Canada is heading in the right direction and creating good jobs, it says it's headed in the wrong direction. I mean, that's pretty obvious. I mean, you don't have to be a human rights commissioner or a rocket scientist to figure out it looks like Canada. Even according to the PBO, the former PBO, Jason Jack, said, we're looking into the abyss. The budget is shocking, stupefying, and unsustainable. Yet we plunge ever so with the foot on the gas pedal as we plunge into the abyss. And it's just more and more.
How's that guy doing?
Jason Jacks?
Now, listen carefully to this, and this is why I'm actually using this clip, because there were 3 parts to this that I wanted to get on, and they actually hit every single part. Now, yes, the Human Rights Commission, very left-leaning, but they are starting to wake up to what's going on. Problem being is, like they pointed out, is they think that by giving them the right to sue the government for their poverty should be something that we should be adopting. Problem being is these are the same people that are voting in the policies that are creating the poverty that we're seeing and the inequalities that we're seeing. I mean, when you're hiring because of a color or a religion, your country is gone batshit crazy. That's just it. When you are voting for somebody who keeps on increasing the debt on Canadians, you're living a batshit crazy country. This is just the reality of it. And the person that was calling this out, Jacques, he was the PMO. He was fabulous. He was actually, the OECD had came out, a couple different organizations and banking institutions, and they labeled him the best parliamentary budget officer ever, because of not only how well he kept the books, how he used his intelligence and training to push away all of the bull crap and put down the numbers in a real fundamental way that you could explain where the government was going. And he pretty much tried warning Canada, and he, again, media, they gave him his little 5-second blip, and then brought on all of their pundits, who are all liberal lefty loonies, to degrade everything he was saying. But then the government replaced him. And now why isn't he speaking up? Listen.
Yeah, I haven't heard much of him lately.
He's been put.
Sleeps with the fishes, doesn't he, nowadays, for the equivalent.
He's been making too much noise, so he's been told to shh, quiet now. You're making a disturbance.
Yeah. If he had the misfortune to have been operating in the Soviet Union or something like that, some sort of like actual dictatorship in the previous century, then he would have died in a car accident, wouldn't he? Or died in an accidental falling out of the window in Moscow, 10 flights to the ground. Purely accidental. But because we live in this friendly, lovely, nice country, he's just been defamed and metaphorically defenestrated.
Well, Diana says we should get him as a guest, and we did reach out, and Jason Jacks at least had the decency to respond. Now that he still works for government, now that he's been taken out of the PBO's chair, he's not allowed to speak, so he can't. So isn't that great how they did that? They're just like, go sit over there and be quiet now.
Using their power to silence him, remove him from the position, and then silence him through legislation and law. We live in a kangaroo country, people. This is a banana republic. This is insanity. Now, I'm going to post the left loony, of course, human rights. It'll be in the description below, because I'm not fake news. I like making sure that the people who subscribe and watch my channel have all the information at their fingertips so that they can be educated and see through the smoke and mirrors and actually understand what's going on. So these are just a few little things that I'm going to kind of point on as I do the typical weave through these stories to kind of connect and stitch them all together for an episode that makes sense and gives a kind of straight idea of just how corrupt and, well, evil our government is. This is the government and consumer spending to support Canadian growth in 2026. TD Economics predicts the business investment in Canada will go negative in 2026, and only government and consumer spending will be there to prop up our economy. So if you're a new viewer, check out my previous episodes, and a lot of this will make sense, because as more and more of these stats are coming out, it's confirmation that I'm telling you the truth. Sorry, so sorry, just the truth, just the facts. J.D. Vance had a amazing little presser he gave in the northern states, and he was questioned about Canada.
Remington Hernandez, News Channel 3 in Kalamazoo. The Gordie Howe Bridge is not too far from here. President Trump has made some comments about trade with Canada. For manufacturers here in Michigan, that bridge will be a lifeline to get products over the border. Do you think that the president has taken the right steps with Canada in regards to the bridge, and do you think that it should open on time?
Well, the president's attitude to Canada is they are an important ally. They're an important trading partner, especially for folks in this region of our country. But Canada has taken advantage of the United States of America for far too long. And they've taken advantage of the United States in a couple of different ways. Number one, they have allowed us to subsidize their entire military, their entire security. Canada pays virtually nothing at least until a couple of years ago, for their own security, which means we had to foot the bill for that security. Is that fair to you and your kids that you have to pay for the military of a foreign country? No. So the President of the United States said to the Canadians, number one, you guys got to take your own security more seriously. You're always going to be an ally, but why don't you have a little bit more self-sufficiency? And I think that makes complete and total sense. The second thing the President said is...
Now, I'm going to be talking a little wee bit about Canada's security plan a little bit later on in the show to kind of really get the understanding out there of how inept, corrupt, and useless our government really is. But let's let JD Vance continue.
If we're going to be true friends, you have to treat our workers as fairly as we've treated Canadian workers for 40 years. Again, we have let so many people over the entire time that I've been alive take advantage of the United States of America. The President said, if you're going to apply a tariff to our goods, we're going to start applying a tariff to your goods too. It's basic fairness. And that's what we've done, and our hope with Canada, and I think we'll get there eventually, is we're going to get to a point where Canada treats our workers fairly, we treat their workers fairly, and they're going to be a true ally and a true friend, not somebody who's taken advantage of us, which is what they've done for most of my life. Thank you.
And he's absolutely correct. Canada has fallen from grace. And as I exposed with the last 50 years in a previous episode, a lot of it will start to make sense when you actually understand the geopolitical role Canada actually plays on the global system of trade. A lot of these wars would never have started if Canada were producing oil and gas for our friends and allies. Because illegitimate governments and dictatorships wouldn't be raking in trillions of dollars to supply military and, well, terror crap all over the world, as well as fund just their own private interests. The amounts of money and wealth that we would have gained, well, think of the healthcare system we think we have as opposed to what we would actually have if we had trillions of dollars coming in our coffers. Our education systems, our roads, highways, rail, every aspect of our life would be better. Our tax base could be lower, which would make us more competitive. More competitive means more businesses and industries want to move in. This is just a normal running country understands this. But for some reason, people are convinced to believe otherwise. Propaganda. Let's take a listen. Prometheus dropped this. These guys they're amazing.
To understand what Trump is actually doing, you have to read what his administration has actually written. The national security strategy came out in December. The defense strategy followed in January. Both delivered huge bad news for the post-war globalist financial order. He wants out of Europe. He's prioritizing the Western Hemisphere, our own country, and trade with the Pacific. Here's what the national security strategy says explicitly about the Middle East. As this administration rescinds or eases restrictive energy policies and American energy production wraps up, America's historical reason for focusing on the Middle East will recede. Instead, the region will increasingly become a source of destination of international investment in industries well beyond oil and gas, including nuclear energy, AI, and defense technologies. Read that again. The intent is to get out of the Middle East militarily and open a new chapter of American-led economic development. And it's not just words. The Gulf states have already committed $17 trillion in investments into the American economy. So why bomb Iran? Because Iran's constant proxy warfare creates perpetual regional instability. And that instability keeps oil prices volatile and high. That volatility is a direct threat to Trump's economic revolution at home. That revolution is built on one major foundation: cheap, reliable energy. Drill, baby, drill isn't a slogan. It's the load-bearing wall of everything Trump is building for the American working class. And it's not just Iran standing in the way. Oil prices are not set in Riyadh or Houston. They're set through London's spot and commodity markets. And those markets profit from exactly the instability Iran provides. The major oil companies have told Trump repeatedly they're not interested in drill, baby, drill. Excess supply drives down prices and endangers their preference for shareholder value, share buybacks. They would rather manage scarcity than flood the market with cheap American energy.
She's absolutely correct, as always. And what has Canada been doing? This is all for the profit of the elites. We could be producing oil and forcing the market's price down, allowing for those who live in poverty to get out of it. For countries that don't have cheap energy to have access to it, thus increasing their own agricultural sectors, helping them in their own regions, which is what Trump is doing. The biggest thing with Trump that Canadians aren't, well, because of propaganda, not aware of. If it wasn't for the last 10 years of this liberal cult, green zealot cult, run by the global elites and China, we would have a much better discussion between. But Trump has watched what's been going on in Canada. Trump's goal is to build the North and South American continent into its own superpower. Enough with the Europe abusing and using all of these third world countries for their own profit. He wants to unleash the power of the people on this continent. But Canada is so far gone. He doesn't know how to deal with us. So he's dealing with us in the only way he can. Now, you notice he's calling out Keir Starmer all the time, but he's being semi-polite, other than calling Carney governor. He's trying to wake Canada up. He's already forced us to jump and start getting involved in our own policies, like investing in the military. But what has Carney done? Here's an incredible stat. In Carney's first year, he has passed the least amount of legislation or creation than any government in the history of Canada. Let that sink in. He's doing this on purpose because he is invested in controlling oils. Look at all of his American investments and the banking system. Every aspect of what forces people into poverty and causes war, fear, hate, division, and all of it. This is where Carney has all of his major investments. And then his second largest portfolio is that of Brookfield and the Green Agenda, which falls into this.
And then there's the ideological layer in Europe. The UK, Canada, and Europe remain committed to the green religion, willing to punish their own citizens with crushing energy prices in service of that ideology. Cheap American energy isn't just an economic competitor to them, it's a theological threat. So when you see NATO allies refusing to back Trump on Iran, this isn't a diplomatic spat among friends. This is the enforcement arm of the British financial empire fighting for its own survival.
Boom. I urge you to watch the entire clip. Prometheus, these people are absolutely famous or fabulous, and they just lay it out as it is. And like a lot of these people have been studying, mostly American politics on the geopolitical scale, and the knowledge, just unbelievable depth and knowledge that they have is incredible. In the meantime, Canada is suffering. This is done on purpose. Carney doesn't care about you. Canada is now a net importer of electricity. What happened to energy superpower? He's had a whole year. What's Carney done? He wants high prices, people. This is where they profit. He wants you poor. It gives him control. He wants you scared so he can create harsher and stiffer legislation removing more rights from who you are. And I'm going to dabble on that as we move on a little bit further. This, of course, worst real GDP per capita growth in the OECD. The worst. This is embarrassing. Nothing's changed. Nothing has changed under Carney. It's the same Liberal Party. He was the one pulling Trudeau's strings. While anybody could have thought that voting for him was creating some new party, makes no sense. And the food professor, and now I'm so happy that he has finally came out of the closet and started to actually pipe up about how bad the media lies and misconstrues truths to the people. And his latest fight is because of this carbon tax, which, again, you still have a carbon tax. Carney lied. He only removed the one that was in the obvious and tried to get it out of the media cycle because people know it's bad. Now nobody's talking about it. Food Professor is trying to bring this to light. Again, propaganda. Let's hide it. If the people don't know about it, it doesn't exist. It does exist. The carbon tax intellectual mob now mobilized by the Prime Minister's office to defend the carbon tax. You agree the carbon tax change on diesel fell by 21 cents a liter and suggest, this is the Food Professor, my analysis assumes a linear increase to 29 cents a liter. That's convenient but incomplete. You're isolating one component of the much broader cost structure and presenting it as a full story. It isn't. Food prices are not determined by what a truck pays at the pump alone. They reflect cumulative costs across the entire supply chain: refining, fertilizer, processing, refrigeration, logistics, all of which remain exposed to carbon pricing mechanisms. And while you focus on partial rollback in one area, you ignore two inconvenient truths. Number one, the industrial carbon tax pricing is still very much in effect and tightening. Energy costs overall are rising, amplifying cost pressures across the system. Cherry picking a 21 cent liter figure does not invalidate broader cost transmission. It simply narrows the lens. With another carbon price increase coming April 1st, Canadians deserve an honest conversation, not selective math. This isn't a comprehensive error. It is refusal to look at the full system. And we always got a chuckle out of it because all of us that pay attention and we're reading all of the legislation, that it's almost like they purposely did it on April 1st, as in April Fools to you dumb Canadians who keep voting in a party that thinks the carbon tax is going to save the world. It won't and isn't doing crap. It's just making life more unaffordable and lining the pockets of the Carney Carnage cartel. Now, to the Vance kind of tie-in. U.S. Trade Representative Jameson Greer said trade talks with Canada have fallen way behind those with Mexico as the administration prepares for this year's review of the U.S.-Mexico-Canada Agreement trade deal. By the way, Mexico has now surpassed Canada in the last 3 weeks for the larger trading partner. Elbows up everybody, we're losing market share that we may never be able to regain. Let this sink in. They are replacing us because Carney wants our self-destruction. He makes money off of it. Oodles and oodles and oodles of money.
We're talking about our Prime Minister, and there's no announcement of this. He just went to China, signed a deal. We have a security agreement with the people who steal our secrets all the time. And supposedly, we are going to get China maybe to replace the United States. We do 3% of business with China, 75% with the United States, but we don't like Trump.
It's laughable. It is so laughable that any Canadian believes that tripe, because that's what it is.
Our Prime Minister
if anybody
does.
no, he doesn't. He doesn't believe it.
Why is he doing this?
Because liberals like China. They like China a lot. Remember Trudeau, how that was his ideal country, that basic dictatorship? And Carney et al., they make potfuls of money. Personally, they make potfuls of money from dealings with China. Brookfield's in there like a dirty shirt, as we know. Everywhere Carney goes, Brookfield is sure to follow. Or maybe it's the other way around. Brookfield's there first. There's always a Brookfield connection to anything he does internationally, and that should be examined much more closely than it is being examined. But as for China, he signed a uranium deal recently, right?
Right.
$2.6 billion. That's less than
with
one
India.
day, over 10 years, by the way, over 10 years. That's less than 1 day of trade with the U.S. The notion that he's saying, who cares about the U.S. and basically shunning the U.S. to benefit, it's pure politics.
Well,
Because
it
he
is
believes
politics.
there's enough of an ignorant, ill-informed segment of the population who actually believe we can replace the U.S. trade. It'll never happen. Governments have tried it for years and years. This doesn't mean, of course, we should diversify our exports. Of course we should. But as someone somewhere said, geography is destiny. Our economies are so intertwined with the U.S., and I figure this November, Trump is going to get seriously weakened in the midterm elections, and he's going to spend his last couple of years as basically a lame duck. And the notion of planning a medium to long-term trade strategy based on one president who's going to be there in the big picture a short period of time is just stupidity.
Well, yes, but why are Canadians believing it? Part of it is because somehow
Because they hate Trump. They hate Trump. And also, though, there's always
not our president.
There's always been an anti-American thing that's run through a certain portion of the Canadian population. And with Trump, because he is such I don't even know what the right adjective is, he's such a strange individual, that's right up to the max in terms of their hatred of Trump. It's irrational. It's, he's hurting Canada. There's a lot of our businesses that are definitely getting hurt. There's no mystery about
But
that.
he's also forcing
but why the
Canadians-
heck don't we get our own house in order?
Well, he's forcing Canadians to do that.
We should
be having big projects going on.
Yeah, we
Carney
should.
talks to him, he doesn't get anything
But
done.
he doesn't get it done. No, we had 10 years of damage under Trudeau, our so-called lost decade, and Carney's done nothing in the year and change that he's been prime minister, other than go on a lot of really nice high-end trips.
Like him, they think he's doing a great job out there.
Some do, and I don't know why. And I wonder, I think this year is going to be a real kicker economically. Last quarter of last year, we had negative economic growth. One more quarter of negative GDP, that's a recession. I think we're going to see recession this year in 2026. A lot of people are hurting, and that's not going to get any better, and maybe that will smack people upside the head and make them realize we have no leadership.
Catherine, the government is going to give everybody checks to help them out of this.
I agree with pretty much 90% of what she's saying. And there is what's going on down in the States with propaganda and the illusion that they have they've been pitting each other against each other, and a lot of the not real MAGA but Republican base are starting to go, this isn't really what we voted for, although it is. They're just not seeing it because they suffer the same problem that we do, just not as bad as we do, which is propaganda. This is the problem with a lot of the civilized societies, countries around the world. Media controls the narrative. The rich have always owned the newspapers, people. They have always put their intentions, wants, and needs first. They always have. Nothing's changed except for now, because of this digital age, it's getting easier for them to control the narrative. And they do so by legislating and removing the freedoms from us citizens. And thanks to Ryan Garrison for posting this, by the way. This is great. This is a privacy lawyer by the name of David Fraser, and he discusses what the government can do if Bill C-22 becomes law. The government can secretly request a company like Apple, and he uses Apple as just an example of their power of what this bill is going to give to the government. It's going to allow direct access to tracking infrastructure on all of their products. Now I'm going to play this and then I'm going to add a little bit in just to clarify on how draconian this legislation is.
If Bill C-22, the Lawful Access Act 2026, becomes the law, the government of Canada will be able to secretly order Apple to build in a capability into its infrastructure to allow Canadian law enforcement and national security folks to track every iPhone, every iPad, every Apple Watch, every Apple AirPod, and every AirTag in real time. Then they'll be able to require Apple to confirm whether they provide you any services. Then they can go to a justice of the peace and get an order, without actually believing that a crime has been or will be committed, requiring Apple to hand over every device identifier for every device that you use with their services. That's the digital ID for your iPhone, iPad, Apple Watch, AirPod, Apple TV, AirTag. With that information, they can go back to the judge and get an order, again without actually believing that a crime has been or will be committed, requiring Apple to give them the moment-by-moment locations of all your devices. Oh, and that secret order also required Apple to keep your location history for a full year, so cops can get that too. Is that a power we want Canadian police and law enforcement to have?
This goes deeper, much deeper, because those who have smart TVs, your TVs listen to you. This gives them the ability to tap directly into your house without any proof that you've done anything wrong. They just need to be suspicious. They don't need to get a warrant to come and bug your house. Not when they can use all of the devices within your home that are already microphones and cameras. Anything tied to the internet. Everything tied to the internet. So all of your communications, what you're watching, who you're talking to, where you're going, they can listen to you, they can spy and visually look at you within your own home, within your own car. They'll know every single aspect of your life. Now, I knew this years ago, so this is why I have refused any smart TVs or any of the devices that you just talk to and ask it, Sirius, play me a music. I don't have any of it because there was already proof that China and other corporations were listening to what you were saying, and they were piling a file on you so that when you got on Google, they knew what you were thinking, what you would be interested in purchasing. And then they were selling that. They were selling that information. Facebook does it. Google does it. Now the government is going to be able to use all those same abilities, but even more. Think about it. Think carefully next time you click on your smart television or ask Siri to play a song. Or you're at work and you want to check on the babysitter and you click on the monitor. Every camera, every microphone, everything wired, they will have just full access. And all they have to do is say, it's suspicious. This is a totalitarian government. They don't care about you. They don't care. Now, let's get on to the military aspect of this. So, the defense minister, David McGuinty, it was busted from a French magazine that the first day of the battle in Iran, our base was attacked. And then Carney came out and was like, "Oh well, I'm not the only one. I'm not the only guy in the government." And then they were trying to kind of cover their butts, so they're using their propaganda. Well, let's just listen to kind of where it started and what they're saying today.
An airstrike hit a Kuwaiti base where some Canadian Armed Forces personnel were stationed. There has been some criticism of how the military handled this. Some folks are saying other countries are more transparent about this war and its risks. Your conservative defense critic says it's really shameful, frankly, that Canadians have been left in the dark about what went on in Kuwait. Will you commit to provide more transparency? Don't the people here in this country have a right to know what's going on with their armed forces?
They have a right to know, as long as it has no bearing on the operational security and the security of the armed forces, women and men who may be serving in the region. I can't put these individuals at risk. And calls to put them at risk by revealing information that should not be revealed is, I think, sort of reckless. It's dangerous. And as I said just a little while ago, I really would like the leader of the official opposition, Mr. Poilievre, with all due respect to him and the role he plays, I would like him to get a top secret clearance so he can come in and get actually briefed on the situation on the ground. I think he would have a better understanding of the importance of making sure that this information is kept confidential because of the risk it might put our men and women in terms of harm's way. That's why this is my highest obligation, to make sure that these good serving members are not put in danger. And they're not. We made sure that they are safe and sound.
They get busted, blatantly trying to hide this from Canadians, and we all know why. It's because they're trying to create and keep this anti-Trump hate rhetoric in Canadians' minds. All they care about is power. They want supreme power. They need it. That's why he hasn't passed anything. He's waiting. He's waiting until he has total control of the government. Once he does, they're just going to start running through all of the agenda that's going to profit them and take away the rights of Canadians. They don't give a shit about our military. If they did, they would have came forward right after it happened and said, "Holy cow, this just happened." But they didn't. They screwed up. Instead, he's using the NSICOP, which we know is a muzzle. The turd, with the help of the global elite, Carney in there, purposely created that legislation to muzzle anybody on the opposition parties, especially when it comes down to things like the interference in our elections, which we know China has controlled 11 solid seats, and it's for sure one senator is on China's side, not Canada's. Then, as all of us are slowly getting the word out on how blatantly dishonest what he is saying is, the truth comes out the day a projectile hit the airbase near Australian personnel.
Can I also report that at 9:15 this morning, at the Al Minyo base that Australia has in the United Arab Emirates, there was an Iranian projectile hit near that base. I can confirm that no Australian personnel were injured and everyone is absolutely safe at this point in time. There was minor damage to an accommodation block and a medical facility due to a small fire that was created as a result of that projectile hitting on a road leading up to that base. I have been to that base and spoken to our Australian Defence Force personnel on more than one occasion. They do a great job for Australia, as do every one of the men and women who proudly wear our uniform.
Oh, now, because other legacy outlets around the world are showing their leaders coming out with a transparent government, keeping the citizens informed of what's going on at their bases, our government now starts to backpedal.
Why did you not inform Canadians about a reported Iranian missile striking a Kuwait airbase with CAF personnel? Does the public not have a right to know?
So I addressed this question yesterday and the day before, and I'll do it again. It is the policy of the Canadian Armed Forces to be very careful and discreet around the safety and security of our personnel on the ground. We do have personnel in the Middle East. They are dispersed in the region. We don't identify their locations. We don't identify where they're moving from or where they're moving to. And we don't comment on situations of operational security. Those who are trying to force commentary on operational security are in, frankly, the opposition parties. I get that. I understand it's part of their job. I respect that job. But I think they're making a mistake. I really do believe that we should be focusing on the absolute responsibility we have to keep our women and men in the Canadian Armed Forces safe and secure. And the good news is they are all accounted for and safe and secure. And maybe just to repeat as well, to be clear, Canada was not consulted about the decision to attack Iran. Canada has not participating and will not participate in the offensive actions in that region. We're obviously keeping a very, very close eye, hour by hour, on the situation. It's evolving. It's a war zone. It's dangerous. That's why we're very careful about commenting on questions like where folks are, what they might have been subjected to, and where they're not. So we, for operational reasons, keep that secure and confidential.
Understood. Quick follow-up from the Ottawa Bureau. When the Prime Minister was asked about the airstrike, he said, quote, he was not the only spokesperson for the government, end quote. As the Defence Minister, does this not mean you could have been more forthcoming in telling Canadians about the situation?
Well, first of all, I was with the Prime Minister at the microphone when he said that in Yellowknife. And I think what he was alluding to was we were traveling. We were on our way to Norway to sign a series of new deals with the Nordic 5 countries to cooperate on military hardware, to cooperate on space. So basically, at the time, it was still something that we were processing internally. I take my lead from the operational experts inside the Canadian Armed Forces. And that's who I work with. That's the information I rely on. And that's why I'm commenting on it right now.
So in other words, gaslight, lie, deceive, twist, flip-flop, and gaslight some more. This is an absolute embarrassment. This man should have been fired immediately. If we had real media, he would be punted. And Canadians would actually be seeing this and realize not to vote Liberal, because Carney is the final say. So he can go ahead and try and pawn off whatever he likes, saying, well, I'm not the only one in government you can talk to. You're the leader of the party. They don't care about you. They wonder why our military are fleeing. All of the greatest military patriots are fleeing. And just to prove that it's the same Liberal Party, the last possible day that they could file an appeal against their embarrassing loss on the Freedom Convoy and the use of the Emergencies Act, they filed. Yes, they did. Why? Well, they wanted to make sure that they had the proper appointees. You got to remember, the majority of our Supreme Courts are all appointed by Liberals. They're corrupt. You can tell by pretty much their decisions on how they deal with things. They're hoping that they can finally win this case and then use it again. Carney said so when he was actually running for the election, how he would use the Emergencies Act in order to get projects done and push his green agenda. It's there. Well, Holly Doan from Blacklocks, I love this. She wrote it so nicely too. It's just the truth, just the facts. It would be open to lawyers to ask the Chief Justice to recuse himself in light of his highly inappropriate comments, which demonstrate a clear bias against the peaceful protest and those who participated in it. It would be up to the Chief Justice to acquiesce to this request or not. because on April 9th, 2022, Chief Justice Richard Wagner told Le Devoir, "What we saw on Wellington Street here was the beginning of anarchy, where certain people decided to take other citizens hostage, to take the law into their own hands." 2 lower courts subsequently ruled Cabinet acted unlawfully in invoking the Emergencies Act at the Freedom Convoy protests. This is the douchebag. He's going to be ruling on the demonstrous use against the Canadians' rights. Whose side do you think he's going to be on? Liberal appointees, people. This is why we have to unchain, remove the justice and policing branches from our government. They should not be appointed. We have got statistics that show who are good judges and who are bad judges. Let their work put them in those seats of power, not appointed to protect the government. And now we're going to kind of tie right into the chaos that we're seeing all over Canada. You know, the shots fired, the synagogues under attack, all of the carnage we're seeing on the streets, the hate speech. Literally, this happened, people, in Germany. And it was propaganda that allowed the people to lose their way. We're seeing it in real time in Canada. Listen very careful. If you've ever wondered how terror lords sleeper cells get into Canada,
so we're not doing that. So basically, they take out their phone theoretically and they tap it a few times, and they are now in the country as a refugee accepted by our country.
Yes, not to mention that about 10% never complete the forms through One Touch. So you figure with about 100,000 claimants a year, that's about 10,000 people who are allowed into Canada who they disappear. For refugee claimants, when they arrive into the country, previously they used to get a full interview with an officer. Security screening was done there. That's changed to a system that's called One Touch. So essentially we get tombstone data, we do some biometrics, and the claimant is then allowed into the country to complete their security screening and such on their own through the One Touch system. They have, I believe it's 45 days to submit that. Meaning, in essence, to speed things up, because we are short-staffed, we're allowing people into the country without first doing that security screening.
Okay, hold on a second. So you're saying that a refugee claimant coming to Canada goes to a machine and says, "I want to be a refugee in Canada," hits a button, and they're in the country? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, it's not a machine, it's an application. So the One Touch system, they're given instructions on how to use that. That connects directly with IRCC, and they're given that documentation to complete on their own once they're in the country. We're not doing that.
So basically, they take out their phone theoretically and they tap it a few times, and they are now in the country as a refugee accepted by our country.
Yes, we get some basic data from them, and again, we do the biometrics. Beyond that, they're doing that on their own, yes.
So no human interaction. Your members do not ask any questions, don't confirm anything. It's a free-for-all into the country that way?
Very little. I don't know if I'd use the term free-for-all, but for the most part, it's self-declaration on the claimant's part, yes.
And so from your perspective and your members' perspective, this is not a good thing?
This is a terrible thing. It's during the interview, and again, I spoke to it in my opening statement about human interaction. That's where we ask follow-up questions. That's where we establish whether there's coaching, whether it's a legitimate claim. That's how those files are built so they can be dealt with properly. Later, that's where we gain that intelligence, and that's currently been lost, not to mention that about 10% never complete the forms through One Touch. So you figure with about 100,000 claimants a year, that's about 10,000 people who are allowed into Canada who they disappear. Then it's our inland officers then have to find them and remove them, so you're adding additional burdens down the road.
So 10,000 potential false claimants coming into that system that have...
10,000 per 100,000. When you add over 500,000 people a year, 50,000 plus. And that's how you get this.
Bridgewater police were tipped off last Friday about online chatter that included a plan to attack Parkview Education Center.
It was specific to killing and murdering other students.
The information about the attack came from Interpol, which is an international police organization, and the FBI.
The FBI and Interpol monitor a lot of certain chat groups online. They have a lot of ability to grab keywords.
Police say the 15-year-old Bridgewater youth was communicating with another youth in Manitoba. Investigators believe the two were allegedly planning a simultaneous attack at Parkview and at Rivers Collegiate in the community of Rivers.
Neither attack was imminent, but obviously if you're in a planning phase or a chatting phase about a school attack, that's a concern to police enforcement.
No specific individuals were mentioned in the plan. During a search of the youth's home, investigators seized imitation weapons, a crudely made pipe bomb, clothing with hate symbols, and electronic devices.
Obviously, those will be analyzed, and that will bring a lot more detail on if they were trying to secure a firearm.
The youth is facing charges of conspiracy to commit murder and uttering threats to cause death.
I'm very proud of that we're able to...
blah, blah, blah. In other words, he's trying to take credit for the FBI and the CIA, who were the ones that said, hey, Canada, there's some schools that are going to get pow-powed. And the cops were like, what do we do? And they scrambled. They didn't even know what was going on, because if they would have had a sting operation set up and the proper surveillance. Instead, they're left scrambling. And then what else happens? Well, you get this. Flights now resume at Montreal Airport after ground stop for a boom threat. Normal flight operations are resuming after authorities investigate the boom threat at the Montreal Trudeau International Airport. One of the airport's runways was temporarily closed during the early part of the investigation. It has since reopened, but residents' delays on flights to and from Montreal could persist for a few hours. According to Eric Forrest, a media relations advisor to Montreal airports, authorities have addressed any safety concerns to passengers. Again, thank the American administrations, FBI, CIA, etc., etc. This is how bad Canada has become. Not only are we bringing these people in unvetted and just don't care if they assimilate or not. In fact, with our government, they want the chaos, the fear, the hate, the division. But then you also have the policing services that are pretty much utterly useless. Now, on to another little buried story, and this is again what propaganda does. This should have been within the first 10 minutes of every news cycle since it broke. Now, I've already reported on this days ago, but it looks like CBC finally had to say something. Where do they say it? They bury it in the reading section somewhere on the website. Flora Crossing MP Iqaluit expensed purchases from her own business. Nunavut MP reimbursed the House of Commons, says purchase made in error. This isn't also discussing the millions that went to her husband and all of the rest of the stuff that's going on hidden from the public. If you're new, check out prior episodes. Nunavut MP Lori Iqaluit says she has reimbursed the House of Commons for items bought from her own shop in error. How long has she been an MP? Again, blatant lie and gaslighting. Iqaluit is the sole proprietor of a gallery, Carvings Nunavut, which sells Inuit-made carvings and artwork. Publicly available expenditure reports show that on 4 occasions in 2025, Iqaluit expensed items to the House of Commons purchased from the business she owns. Members of Parliament are not allowed to benefit from expenses or contracts charged to the House of Commons. The total value of the purchases was $1,756. Two $150 purchases were made in January 2025, a $76 purchase was made on July 2025, and a $1,380 purchase was made on August 27th. All were listed as gifts given as a matter of protocol. In a statement sent to CBC News following questions about these expenditures, Italit wrote they were for Indigenous artwork used in her capacity as an MP. They were submitted in error. I have subsequently reimbursed the House of Commons for the total value, she wrote. Well, easy now, because she'll just, get some cash off her multi-millionaire husband. That was given tax dollars. Again, she crossed the floor, blah, blah, blah. No heavy scrutiny, no holding her to justice. A puff piece buried in the back pages of the internet where nobody will see it, where it just goes to die. This is propaganda at its finest. And to end the show, I have some fabulous news. As I am just finishing this up, Poilievre is sitting next to Joe Rogan having a podcast. And it sounds like they're going to race the editing and possibly have it out tomorrow night. I will be sure to share that with you. I also want to send just a huge shout out to Sean Sterling for the amazing music productions that he sent upon my request. I gave him full artistic creation, and he absolutely nailed it. Not just this, I've got a few others as well. Until next time, you guys, I'm going to leave you with the entire song so you can enjoy it. I'm Elias Tagay. Stay informed.
Western separation or Canadian unity, we're torn like a maple leaf lost in the sea. But Elias Guy's voice cuts through the static. Stand strong, stand tall. This land's democratic. From the Rockies and rage to Parliament walls, we'll fight for the freedom that answers our call. His words spin like a rogue CBC, a rogue wave crashing on a woke TV. They'll paint us as rebels, but we're just the spark, light in the dark where the silence leaving marks. The government's hand weighs heavy like snow, but the West won't kneel where the storm they can't slow. Alias guys, truth burns a hole in their lies, a northern light screaming, a nation survives. So rally the trucks, let the coffee shops hum, the West beat it hard. Won't stay deaf and dumb through protest and picks over carve our own way. A Canada to fraction would fight into.